Today I'm going to be going through the elements and principles of design or art. There's a lot of different conceptions of how to describe these or how to discuss these and which ones fall under the principles of art and which fall under the principles of design, but I'm just going to go through a basic generalization. The elements and principles of design were first addressed in writing by Arthur Wesley Dow in his book Composition, and it says under line, notan, and color. So he's essentially setting up the elements in the title. Notan is a fancy word for how much light, what we often refer to as value today. Since then, there have been other books that have come out and other authors that have tried to exemplify different types of principles of art and design to the point where there are large books that you can go through and they've got hundreds of key concepts, but ultimately we're going to stick with the basics. So the elements of design or art are the building blocks. Just like in science or biology, they are what all other things are made up with. If you don't do a line, if you don't do a shape, if you don't do a color, if you don't do a value, form, texture, space, ultimately you're not going to be able to make anything. But the way you use these things in combination become the principles. So line plus color can be used in balance, shape, contrast, any of these. So the elements are what build up a principle. So just to go through the elements very quickly, a line is a moving dot. So it starts in one point, but then it moves. So it's actually a 2D representation of a dot. It's a moving dot. Shape is a closed form of lines. So the lines will go around and they will come back to their starting point. Color is how our eyes measure different wavelengths. We can see reds and greens and blues and things like that. Value is how much light or darkness is in the work. The best way to do that is to take a picture of a colored image and turn it black and white and see how they change. If they all look around the same grays, it's very muted. If you have a high value content, you'll have a lot of blacks and whites and separation in between. Form is a three-dimensional shape. So not only is it going around this way, but it's going around in a third dimension as well. Texture is how the surface of the subject matter looks. Does it look fuzzy? Does it look rough? Does it look smooth? Texture is how the surface of objects look. And then space is the distance between any subject matter. So there is space in between these words and these words. So it's the separation of subject matter or objects. Now I'm going to spend most of the time on the principles. So what I have laid out here are 8 different principles. Typically people say that there is only 7. The way they describe those things can be different. So for the principles, proportion and scale, it's how big something is. And from a very primitive standpoint as human beings, we recognize things that are much bigger as important and much smaller as less important. Ultimately, because of the primitive keep safe. If something is big and coming at me, it can overpower me, so it's important. If it's small, it's probably far away and it doesn't concern me as much. Balance is equaling both sides. So this can be 2 large objects, it can be a large object and a bunch of small objects that take up the same space. So thinking about a scale, like if both sides are equal, then it's in balance. If there's a lot on one side, it is off balance and the focus becomes on one side or the other. Contrast is opposite things. And typically this is exemplified by whites and blacks. So maybe positives and negatives. So opposing things on different parts or different halves of the sheet. So it could also be colored or black and white. Emphasis can come in a lot of different ways. And depending on how you use the emphasis, it can either de-emphasize or emphasize, and it can be switched around. So things that are emphasized are typically bigger, closer, brighter, more detailed, centered, more colored, framed, things pointing at it, higher contrast, but albeit different. Things that de-emphasize are smaller or farther, dull, blurry, off to the side, tonal, things that are noisy or lost in the crowd. So if you have a subject matter that you're trying to focus on and there's tons of things around it, it's noisy. There's a lot of things going on, so it's harder to focus on that one thing. Now, this can be changed to the opposite if the predominant images are of the already emphasized. So, for instance, if all the subject matter are really big and you have one small subject matter, then the small subject matter is different, so it is emphasized. So by overwhelming the subject matter in one way and then having something that's completely different, it will establish emphasis. Pattern or repetition is repeating there or not. So a lot of people, when thinking about pattern, they think about when they were in preschool or kindergarten and they had to put circle, square, circle, square, circle, square, or red, blue, because there's a pattern there of repetition. Now, advanced patterns go much farther and ultimately become a means of code. So it's recognizing if there is something that is missing when it's supposed to be there. So you could have 20 different things, and it might take all of 20 to get the repetition. But ultimately, the pattern is a repeating there or not. What is repeating or what is missing? Rhythm and movement is how your eye moves through the artwork. So what is most important, what's second most important, third most important, and it'll cause your eye to actually be steered in the artwork. Harmony or unity is best exemplified by mandalas. So if you've ever seen a mandala, it's a circle that has a lot of different patterns going around and around and around, and it's showing that everything is in its place, everything is unified, everything is working towards this center goal. So when using it in an artwork, it's the feeling that everything belongs there or everything is in its place. Everything has a purpose. You could use the example of a classroom where the students are in their desks are doing their work, the teacher's doing their work, and then a clown comes in. So the clown would be very out of place, causing a dissonance or disharmony. If you remove the clown, then everything is as it should be. So anything chaotic, anything to upset the accepted way that things should be is a dissonance or a disharmony. When everything is as it should be, everything is in harmony or unity. An eighth principle is sometimes thrown in there with variety. So just using all different types in the same image. But ultimately, variety is not always considered amongst the 7 principles. So there are typically 7 elements and 7 principles. Now, the way that principles are used can be used in the literal way that I just explained, or they can be used in a figurative or metaphorical way. So with proportion or scale, the The things that are most important are going to be the biggest, and the things that are least important are going to be the smallest. When you look at young children's artwork, if they draw a family portrait, they will put themselves, if they are still in an egocentric state, as the largest. And then their most favorite people in the family picture also become largest. So maybe mommy is very important. So mom is portrayed much bigger than, say, daddy or brother or sister or whoever else is in the family. So proportion and scale is using the biggest things to show the most importance. Balance is showing two equal parts of your life. So the balance could be work and play, working and sleeping, school and home, summer, winter. It's the different things that equal out your livelihood. Contrast are opposing things in your life. It can be good or bad, or they can be opposite things. Maybe things that you do in the day, maybe things that you do in the night, maybe things that you do at school, maybe things that you do at home. It's the separation of the things in your life. Emphasis are the most important things, or the things that are most meaningful to you, or the things that are the most abundant. So if you spend most of your time doing something, that is emphasized in your life. If you do not do it much, then it's not going to be emphasized. Pattern or repetition are the patterns in your life. And this can be zoomed in to maybe an hour, or it can be zoomed out to a year or multiple years. So what is the pattern of your life? What are these things that are always reoccurring or fading out and fading into your life? Particularly in Wisconsin, where we have different climates, the way that you behave in summer is going to be very different than the way that you behave in winter. So there are different patterns because of the seasons, and the seasons themselves also are patterns. The rhythm or the movement in your life are where your eye focuses, what order of operations, what comes first, second, third, fourth. It's an order of importance, or things need to be executed in for them to happen properly or to be able to be done anyways. Harmony and unity is when everything in your life is working as it should be. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going good, but there's a forward progression. There's this flow of order and chaos that is constantly keeping you motivated, learning, exercising, but also keeping you rested. Variety is the differences that you are experiencing in your life. So it might just be one thing that is different a lot of different times, or you might get a lot of different things. If you do not have variety, you have stagnation, which means it becomes boring. So the only way to have variety in your life is to try and work on different things and learning what those things are, how you categorize them, how you organize them. So this is how you could use the principles metaphorically or figuratively. So when you are doing artwork, think about the things that are important in your life or the meaningful things in your life. If you've done the rhizome project where you're taking the bubbles and you're putting your name in the middle, and then you're establishing the important or meaningful or the things that occur a lot in your life, and figuring out what is good and what is bad in your life, or what you like or dislike, you can use those paired with the principles to establish what the meanings in your life are. So using these principles can help you establish what your own beliefs are or what your own understanding is, and better communicate those things to other people. So these are the elements and principles of design. Thank you for your time and your attention. Do more, do better.